مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. العزل الجزء الثاني انتهى الآن بعد أسبوع محموم. امتلأ بدراما تكفي مسلسل تلفزيوني من مسلسلات هوليوود. قرر مجلس الشيوخ للمرة الثانية أن دونالد ترامب بريء مما يسميه الدستور جرائم كبرى وجرح. عدد المنشكين من الجمهوريين كان أكبر هذه المرة من العام الماضي، 7 من بين 50، مقارنة بواحد فقط في محاكماته الأولى العام الماضي. ولكن النتيجة كانت واحدة، لأن القانون يتطلب موافقة ثلثي أعضاء مجلس الشيوخ ليصدر الحكم بالإدانة. إلى أين تذهب الأمة من هنا؟ هل دونالد ترامب الآن مجرد رئيس سابق سيء السمعة محروم من تويتر؟ أم أنه ما يزال أقوى جمهوري في أمريكا بقبضة محكمة على حزبه؟ هل كان الوقت الآن ليبدأ جو بايدن رئاسته بداية فعلية؟ أم أننا شاهدنا لتوانا بداية حملة إلى الانتخابات الرئاسية لعام 2024؟ لمناقشة السياسات الأميركية في أعقاب تبرئة ساحة الرئيس ترامب، يسرني أن أرحب باثنين من مراقبي واشنطن الملتبسين الصحفيين دانيال ليبمان وناومي ليم. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. I'm delighted to welcome Daniel Lippman and Naomi Lim. Let's take a look at this more closely. Naomi, in our system, the House of Representatives, the majority, constituted a team of prosecuting attorneys who were actually elected representatives, politicians. How did they do in presenting the case and prosecuting against former President Trump?
I think the general consensus is that the House impeachment managers did a very compelling job. And I think their job was made easier because the audience that they were speaking to, the 100 senators in the room, were also first-hand witnesses of the events that unfolded on January 5th. I think particularly like the lead impeachment manager, Jamie Raskin, was generally applauded because of the emotional the emotional sort of narrative that he wove about his family and their experiences within the Capitol building that day. And I think that they also really benefited from being really thorough and relying a lot on video testimony, particularly showcasing footage that had never been seen before from security footage cameras and things like that. And I think that it really reminded people what happened that day, because I know it's only been a month, but a month is a very long time in politics. And I think that visual reminder was quite a searing and compelling way to bring this single article of impeachment against the former president.
So in this trial, if congressmen were the prosecuting attorneys, the defense did not rely on congressmen. The defense went and found private citizens, private attorneys to represent Donald Trump. Why was that, Daniel, and how effective were they?
So the reason is that no Republican congressman wanted to do it, and I think they were both houses of Congress, the House and the Senate. They were voting on this impeachment. And so you really don't want to have the jurors represent the defense. And so that's why Trump hired some personal attorneys. And he wasn't able to get the best of American legal minds to represent him, because this is the biggest, this would be the biggest platform in their careers, and they don't want to lose clients because they represented Donald Trump. And so they seem to have done better as the week went on, but they were still kind of scattershot in how they're defending Trump.
I know it's a little complicated, Naomi, but at one point, the House managers wanted to bring a Republican congresswoman and put her on a witness stand to give testimony against Donald Trump. What was that all about?
So basically, there was a lot of flap on what happened to be the last day of the impeachment proceedings, because, as you said, the Democrats wanted to bring forward witness testimony from one female congresswoman who sort of had a knowledge of something of a conversation between former President Trump and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy about sort of what he knew about the riots and when. And I think they did a dramatic vote to say that they would allow that, but within sort of 2 hours, they actually reversed the decision. And a lot of that was because Trump's lawyers, however uncompelling on different matters, they sort of reached an agreement so that wouldn't have to deal with threats of having Trump's lawyers sort of call House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and I guess bog down these proceedings for months and months on end or weeks, I should say, when President Biden is, I think, looking to try and get past this sort of Trump era and move forward with not only his cabinet confirmation hearings, but also moving forward on key parts of his legislative agenda.
So, but although that would have been quite compelling to see one Republican elected official on the witness stand offering testimony against Donald Trump, I can't imagine that the Republicans would have enjoyed seeing that image on national television that evening. And Naomi, do you think there'll be retribution against some of these senators that voted to convict Donald Trump? I mean, some came from some of the most conservative Republican states, Nebraska, Louisiana, North Carolina. Are they going to face retribution at the polls?
Well, that's, I guess, remains to be seen. I think, the next election cycle isn't for another sort of 18 months, 2 years. So things might have changed from then. But right now they are facing, real repercussions. Daniel mentioned Senator Richard Burr from North Carolina. He has been sort of censured by the local state Republican Party there. And as Daniel was sort of laying out, like that's a really sort of a powerful move for someone who, that has been in politics for a while down there. And so I think that there's a lot of time and a lot of things that could happen to play out to see whether they're all going to face sort of a challenge at the polls. I'm sure that this will be sort of fodder for a primary challenge. But I think sort of moving forward, well, there's a lot to be seen. I think we've also seen people that were in the House and House Republicans, like a representative from Illinois called Adam Kissinger. His family wrote an open letter sort of complaining that he voted for the impeachment article coming out of the House. So I think they are facing repercussions right now, but who knows what happens in 2022.
And there's at least one senator I want to talk about for whom the repercussions are now issues, and that's Mitch McConnell, who came out with a blistering statement about Donald Trump, even after voting to acquit. Naomi, what's the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell's logic here?
I think for Senator Mitch McConnell, he's always been a very, very astute tactician, and for him, what is most important is sort of clinging back power or clinching back power in the Senate. And so he's got his mind for 2022. He actually did a interview with the Wall Street Journal recently, where he sort of laid out the case of why the Republican Party needs to divorce from President Trump. He sort of cited the Georgia 2 Senate runoffs that we saw in January and the losses that the Republicans sustained there as just one piece of evidence for them moving forward. Now, that interview was received very poorly from the former president. He might not have Twitter, but he certainly has press releases that were issued by a super PAC that still supports him, where he sort of used very vulgar descriptions of McConnell, calling him, I think, a sullen, dour, unsmiling politician. And so I think that while Trump is no longer in power, he still holds some power over the Republican Party, particularly that base, that that will be for him, and potentially wasn't with the party before Trump came along.
All right, when we come back after the break, Daniel, we're going to talk about the implications of all this for as American politics moves forward in the wake of the impeachment acquittal of Donald Trump in just a moment. One of the great debates in American politics today is about the minimum wage, the lowest acceptable compensation for hourly labor allowed by law. The current federal minimum wage is $7.25 per hour. Some states have higher levels, and there's a debate in Congress now whether to raise it to $10, $11, or even $15. But there was a time when controversy was not about the right limit, it was over the very idea of a minimum wage. Massachusetts was the first state to have a minimum wage, passed in 1912. And by 1923, 15 states and the District of Columbia had minimum wage laws. But for decades, the US Supreme Court declared these laws unconstitutional as an infringement on the right of employers to contract with their workers. Even in 1933, at the height of the Great Depression, the court rejected the Roosevelt administration's passage of the first national minimum wage law. Finally, after FDR won re-election by an overwhelming vote in 1936, he tried again with passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act. With the threat of packing an enlarged Supreme Court with more progressive justices in the air, this time the court relented, and our nation had its first national minimum wage. How much was it? 25 cents per hour, equivalent to about $4.50 today. Again, our panelists today include Daniel Lippman. Daniel covers the White House for Politico, where he also covers Washington politics. He authors playbooks, Great Weekend Reads on Saturdays and Sundays, and the social data section of Politico New York's playbook. Previously, he was a reporter with the venerable Wall Street Journal in New York. Also joining us is Naomi Lim. Naomi is a politics writer at the Washington Examiner. She previously reported on crime and politics for News Corp Australia. Her journalism work includes stints at CNN and the BBC, while earning a master's degree in public policy here at Georgetown University in Washington. Prior to becoming a journalist, she trained as a lawyer in Australia. All right, Daniel, let's take a step back for a moment. In retrospect, in your view, do you think, or do Democrats think, they made the right decision about choosing to go for a full-blown impeachment trial, which ended up in acquittal, rather than, say, a censure of Donald Trump, which might have won even greater Republican support?
I think Democrats feel confident that they made the right decision because they have base pressures too, and their party loyalists were hungry for another impeachment. They thought that Trump's actions and rhetoric were beyond the pale, and that a censure would not suffice. And so they had to kind of go through another impeachment effort, even if they thought that it was unlikely to succeed fully. And so I think Democrats, especially on the Hill, they were the target of this insurrection. And so that it was felt very personal to them. And so that's why they were so eager to punish Trump for this.
And this story, though, isn't over, is it? We're going to have, it sounds like Nancy Pelosi is going to announce a new commission to investigate precisely what happened. What's the objective here, and how is that going to be set up, Naomi?
So Nancy Pelosi this week sort of announced her intention to form this sort of 9/11 style commission just to get to the bottom of some things that the Trump lawyers didn't address during the impeachment proceedings. The White House has also signaled that they'll support such an effort, which is interesting because there was a lot of talk about how they didn't really want to weigh into impeachment, but this sort of continues on this narrative of Trump and sort of keeps his name in circulation as they move forward. The other fallout that Trump sort of faces is this threat of legal lawsuits. The other thing that is a threat is potentially the criminal prosecution of Trump over these things. It's something, again, that the White House is being pressed on. They're very cautious about trying to have a mark between the White House, the White House as well as the Justice Department, and that's something that they're leaving up to Attorney General designate Merrick Garland to decide, when he is likely to be confirmed by the Senate. And so I think that that's all sort of what remains to be seen in the next couple of months.
And then there are still dozens of trials about to occur of the insurrectionists themselves. Is that right, Daniel?
Yeah, most of them are trying to fight these charges. They don't want to go to jail for a long time. They don't want to face huge fines. A lot of them are blaming Donald Trump, saying that he gave them permission to go into the Capitol, and so that's their defense. But a lot of them documented this stuff on social media, and so it's very hard for them to deny that they were being there. And so this is something that we're all watching to see, who, there are prominent individuals who seem every day to get arrested. This is not going away right now.
So I want to ask both of you to telescope out for a second. This is now the second impeachment trial in a year. It's the third impeachment trial in 20 some odd years after a century of no impeachment trials. Are people thinking that maybe that impeachment is not the best tool to try to address these wrongs? Is there some impeachment fatigue that might be setting in as a method for trying to hold presidents to account? What is the emerging mood on the idea of impeachment as a political and legal tool? Daniel first.
I think that we're probably going to see a pause for impeachments for a little bit. And so I don't expect Joe Biden to face any impeachment trials this presidential term unless there's a huge abuse of power. But it's definitely, it seems to have been normalized in the last few years, because now anytime a president does something seriously wrong, the other party is going to propose an impeachment. And if they are in control of Congress, then they will likely get their wish. And so this is a slippery slope, because voters are supposed to have the final decision on who's president. And if Congress is impeaching presidents left and right, that is troubling if that continues as a trend.
And Naomi, do you hear any talk about the use of impeachment in the future?
I mean, we've already seen it in the first week of this Congress. Just to pick up Daniel's point about the normalization of these proceedings, we saw Republican Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene sort of threaten President Biden with an impeachment proceedings on his first day in office. And I think that might be, obviously that's something that would be almost impossible for her to bring up, just given that Republicans don't control either chamber of Congress. I think that's just one example of how we might see this threat of impeachment sort of weaponized, now that we've seen so many in modern politics.
And if the last impeachment made a bit of a media star out of the chief impeachment manager, Adam Schiff, do we expect there to be a rising political future for any of the House managers this time around? Daniel?
I think Jamie Raskin, the congressman from Maryland, he has a bright future. Adam Schiff is looking at rising up as well, even though he wasn't involved this time around. But most people only get 15 minutes of fame if they're lucky. And so these House Democratic impeachment manager / prosecutors, they're going to use it for their own careers as well. And so this gets their name ID slightly higher.
All right. All right, Daniel Lippman, Naomi Lim, thank you very much for helping to decipher the intricacies of the second Donald Trump impeachment trial for our viewers abroad. Thank you for joining us on Dakhel, Washington. In this uncertain world, there are a few certainties. Tom Brady will find a way to win the Super Bowl. Jeff Bezos is going to be richer tomorrow than he was yesterday. And our two major political parties will be the Democrats and the Republicans. Well, one of these certainties is less certain today than at any time in recent history, and it's not the one about Brady or Bezos. We take for granted that American politics is a forever struggle between the center-left Democratic Party and the center-right Republican Party. These two parties have been competing for political dominance in America ever since the Civil War, with their current ideological coloration at least since the Great Depression. But this certainly is not ordained by law or by God. It can change. In fact, it has. Today's Republican Party was only born in the 1850s, just a few years before Abraham Lincoln was elected first Republican president. Before then, the main competitors to the Democrats were called Whigs, a party that elected 4 presidents and was a major force for about a quarter century. But then in the 1850s, just 2 years after electing one of their own as president, the Whigs collapsed, torn apart over the issue of slavery. From their ashes, the Republicans emerged. Can a single issue destroy an institution like a political party? The example of the Whigs teaches us the answer is yes. Today, for the first time in about 170 years, the fate of one of our two major political parties is again in doubt. The issue isn't a moral crusade like slavery. It's the question of Donald Trump and the remarkably magnetic, some would say cultish, grip he has on a large part of the Republican Party. The impeachment vote underscored the deep division in the party over Trump. More senators, 7, voted to convict a leader of their own party than ever before in American history. This included a former head of the party, its 2012 presidential candidate, Mitt Romney, as well as senators from loyal Republican states like Louisiana, North Carolina, Nebraska, and Alaska. And still, Trump took the ultimate acquittal as exoneration, a confirmation he was in the right all along. His supporters vowed to make the renegades pay a price for their treason. He has meanwhile hinted he may run again for president in 2024. Can the Republican Party survive another run by Donald Trump or anyone with the Trump name? Will that prospect tear the party asunder, triggering a breakup in which traditional conservatives leave the party in the hands of American first nationalists? Are we seeing a tectonic shift in American politics happen before our very eyes? What was once just cocktail party chatter or the stuff of fringe media is now a very real question. بهذا نصل لنهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة حول أثر محاكمة العزل الثانية على السياسة الأميركية، أرجو أن تتواصلوا معي عبر تويتر على هاشتاغ Inside Washington أو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على @RobSatloff. سأراكم الأسبوع المقبل وإلى أن ألقاكم. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.